Hello and welcome to Inside the Avatar Studio. Inside the Avatar Studio brings together innovative leaders from the virtual technological frontier to discuss their perceptions, perspectives, and predictions of what being virtual means in today's society. I'm your host, Kevin Feenan, and with me today is Terry... I apologize. Terry Beaubois.
Very good.
There we go. Okay, excellent. I got it. Known more popularly in Second Life as Tap Scott. Terry is the director of the Creative Research Lab in the College of Arts and Architecture at Montana State University. An architect with over 35 years of professional experience, Terry started out in Second Life in 2005 designing a digital collaboration for architects, gaining international notoriety. Popular Science magazine in 2006 is quoted as saying, "A version of Beaubois' classroom could be the standard for distance learning." Recently, Terry has been demonstrating a new after-school partnership technology for use by Montana State University Department of Education and the Montana K-12 schools for homework help, math, science, mentoring, and book clubs. Terry, thank you very much for being on Inside the Avatar Studio.
My pleasure, Phil, and thank you for having me here today.
Yeah, I've got all kinds of things that as soon as Bevan started telling me that we were going to have an architect on board, because she likes me to come up with these neat little taglines that we can put up, right? And one of the things I found all these very interesting quotes from all kinds of different architects, which I want to talk to you a little bit about a little bit later. But I mean, for the moment, I'd like to know if you could give us a bit more background on the Creative Research Lab and how it's being used in the context of virtual worlds.
Yeah, well, the lab is a lab that is part of a college that's made up of art, music, film, photography, and architecture. And it's a college of arts and architecture, and it's within the University of Montana State University. And so I get to play with all the fun people. Directly with the faculty, students who are majoring in those topics. But I also get to work with, because in founding the lab, the goal from the beginning was to create projects that were worked on in an interdisciplinary and collaborative method. And what that means is we just don't only have architects working on the project. I'm working on some projects now that we have engineers and people from the library and people from the business school. And we're finding that students having this opportunity to work in collaboration with other majors during the academic portion of their career is really worthwhile. They really get a lot out of it. They learn a lot about working together. And then we found in working with, we have a lot of industry sponsors as well, companies that are interested in participating in university level research, because we are a research lab, but it's applied research. We're not going to invent the cure for cancer. We don't work on a molecular level. We're looking at applying advanced technologies in communication and collaboration in our fields of study. So we're looking at these projects, and what the people in industry are telling us, they're not really looking for students who can take and pass tests. I mean, so much of higher education and K through 12 is spent focusing on this sort of sitting still in your seat for 45 minutes without disrupting the rest of the class and being able to take a test and pass it. And what we're finding is that's one of the least useful capabilities that we could be focusing on as far as what happens after you graduate. Very few of us have to sit down and take tests. So, what the students really enjoy doing, and we find helps develop skills for them, so it increases the chances that companies will want to hire them after graduation, is that they know how to work on teams with other people, with other majors, with other creative people, and come up with solutions that haven't been developed before. That's really what people are valuing in a college level education and career. So that's the focus of my lab. It isn't like the whole university is doing that. It isn't like everyone in our college is doing that. But that's the total focus of our lab is really looking at how we can, in the 21st century, look at collaborating among the different disciplines and seeing where we can make our contribution in that area. Does that answer sort of what you were asking? Please feel free to direct me some more on that one.
No. Well, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, there's all kinds of different ways that I could say that we could sort of go from here. I mean, one of the obvious ones, from my perspective, anyways, would be obviously Montana State University is looking to adapt more to the needs of where the students or how the students are going to become more successful after they've left the university program. And one of the hot topics, or used to be the hot topics, I don't know if it still is, but used to be this idea of assessment inside the educational field in terms of how do we assess learning. And what I'm wondering about, because you're finding that through industry, they're interested in teaming and solutions and innovation, but teaching innovation isn't something that you take a test on. Right? If you've already got the answer, it's not innovative, right? So how do you restructure, or are you looking at the idea of restructuring the assessment process in order to match what it is that you're doing with the lab and the goals that you're trying to sort of achieve out of it?
Well, that's an excellent point, because in the higher education system, one does have to develop successfully with the tools and the currency that is used in higher education. So you hitting on assessment is perfect, because how do you assess if you're going to change different things? In fact, in 2005, when a lot of people were coming into Second Life for the first time, and I realize they're still coming in now, and many people have come in since then, but it was sort of a new frontier, and they really were having trouble figuring out how do you grade a class in Second Life that they were teaching. And a lot of educators who came in here struggled with that, quite frankly. My approach was very clear. We're very project-driven, so the first year when I was in here and I was teaching a class called Digital Collaboration for Architects, and it was very, very specific. Each student, we had an island, and we all had areas on the island where we were going to do individual projects, and then there was an area on the island where there was going to be a collaborative project. Because what I found was people were not comfortable only collaborating. To really exercise the muscles and the expectations, meet the expectations that they had, they wanted to do their own little project, because we were trying to move people from thinking, and this is an interesting point. When I came to MSU, it was illegal to collaborate. When I listed my class, I was contacted by the administration. I was told that collaboration was illegal and that I couldn't call my class that. And I was thinking, what are they talking about? And they said, well, we caught 2 students collaborating last year, and it was really awkward, but we had to dismiss them from the university. And I'm going, they're thinking the like Benedict Arnold kind of collaboration. And I was getting all ready to really sort of let them have it about how ridiculous it is that they're interpreting that way. And so in part of my preparation for showing why I was proposing a class on collaboration, I looked it up in the dictionary, and the second definition is collaborating with the enemy. So I realized, okay, this is at the very heart of education and what we're trying to do. I'm trying to communicate to the administration what I'm, offering as part of the class assignment, and they're telling me I can't do it. So I explained to them what I wanted to do, and they said, you can do that. And then I said, and I call it collaboration. It isn't about cheating on a test by copying someone else's stuff. And they said, okay, fine. As long as you stay within those boundaries, you can do it. So it wasn't a major confrontation, but it was a really interesting adjustment right away before the class started, realizing that we all use words in different ways. And when we got into the class the first year, it was very interesting because this is 2005, okay, September 2005. So we're going back 6 years, and I'm teaching in Second Life. The students have never seen anything like this before in their lives. And what I'm doing is I'm going to teach in Montana for 2 weeks. Then I'm going to go back to California for 2 weeks and teach remotely in Second Life only, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 8 to 12. And they will only see my avatar. So we're really sort of testing what it's like to use this as a distance learning tool, but we're also learning how to communicate. At the time, we only had text chat. And so for the first 6 weeks, we were only using text chat. And I was talking with somebody about this today. And what it allowed us to do, because I had a few like computer science programmers in the class in addition to the architecture students, but it allowed us to it allowed me as an instructor to watch a conversation between two students. And when I saw it going poorly, I didn't have to interrupt them and say, no, do this, not that, or this isn't what that person means. I could let it go through its total course where they finally got to the point where they go, F you, no, F you, and they walk off. And so the conversation just didn't work, the communication didn't work, the collaboration didn't work, and I could call them back and we could go through the IM or the chat, and I could show them where the misunderstanding took place. And it was very instructive. The students, appreciated it. We were able to keep the teams together. We experimented with collaborating in 2s and 3s and 4s and just to see how the different projects went. We probably did, an assignment a week. And the other fortunate thing was I had 2 students who were so good. They were just, 3D stars that I made them my teaching assistants. And so I had help in the class right away from the beginning, and that was greatly appreciated. But the goal was, can we use this new virtual environment to support us in our role as educators to help teach what we're trying to teach anyway? It wasn't so much about teaching what virtual worlds were. It was about using virtual world as a tool to help us educate students in this case, it was architects, so in that profession. So we were, and I met Lumiere Noir. I don't know if people know him or not. It's one of the most fantastic avatars in Second Life. He had already created the ivory tower of Prims and this learning center. And so I was able to take students there, and this was a big surprise to me. Lumiere had set up these stations. He had 32 stations that taught you how to work with Prims. If people are familiar with them, they're wonderful areas. Gina, there are nice education center. So I actually took all my students there, I showed them around, and then I said, okay, I will teach each of you individually, I will teach you as a group, or I'll teach you in any combination, or I'll just let you come here and you can teach yourselves how to build using the Second Life tools, going through the ivory tower stations. And much to my surprise, 100% of the students just said, oh, we want to go on our own and we'll just teach ourselves. And it was interesting because I was both surprised and sort of disappointed at first, because it was like, well, there just went my first 2 weeks of my, teaching syllabus. They're going to teach themselves. And what I found was, in talking with them, this education and learning really takes a lot more repetition than most people have patience for. And even as fifth-year college students, some of them, it would take them 12 times to learn how to do a certain rotation of a prim or stretching it or something like that. And they didn't want to do that in front of the class, and they didn't want to do that in front of the teacher. They were happy to, if it only took them 1 or 2 tries to learn it that way, if it took them 12 times to learn something, it's no big deal. And so everyone in the class could self-teach with these wonderful stations that Lumiere had created. That was that was the first thing that made me think, my God, this is a wonderful environment. We can create little teaching kiosks that the students can go to, and we can sort of really increase our function, because we can then teach other things if all the students are happy to teach themselves on these kiosks. The other thing I found was one of the students who actually went on, and he's working for a animation film company right now. He was just a superstar. But one of them came in, and at 8 o'clock in the morning, he came in. He says, "Terry, I want to build this a little auditorium that the class can sit in, and then I want this history of architecture slideshow to show in the air, and so we can sit there and go in there and people can study the history of architecture." And I went, "Great, knock yourself out." So he built this. By 10 o'clock in the morning on the same day, he invited us all in, and we went in, and people sat down, and it turned out to be sitting on the steps instead of the seats that he had around the corner. And because the first person that went in there sat down on the steps, everybody else went in and saw it and sat down on the steps next to him. So we're all sitting there on the steps, and he's going, "Why are you sitting on the steps?" And it was like really, really difficult as an instructor not to state the obvious. And well, maybe the steps look like the seats, and they did. They were just rows of black steps, and the seating was the same thing. So one of the students said, "Oh, well, Cliff sat down there first, and we all just sat next to him." So we went around and sat in the seating areas that he had, and then we watched his show. And then I didn't say anything to him other than, "Good job, Adam." And we went away, and then about an hour later, I got another email from him. I said, "Terry, can you bring the class back in?" And he had redesigned the space based on the fact that he had given a visual cue that misled everybody and had us sitting in the wrong place. But what he did was, hang on a sec. What he did was he redesigned based on user input, and he changed everything. And by noon of that day, so we're starting from 8 o'clock in the morning, the guy has an idea. By noon of that day, I get an email from him saying, "Terry, I've learned more in the last 4 hours than I thought I would learn all semester." And that's when you know you've got an environment that is really supporting education and really supporting teaching and learning, really supporting, conveying architecture and designing spaces. So for me, within the first 2 weeks of using Second Life and having students, I was sold on its strength as a tool and what we can use it for, and how it can be a very, very exciting environment. The fact that it exists is just amazing to me still.
It can, but it is this based on your. I mean, it's the illusion is wonderful, but I'm sitting here wondering how long you're going to have a job if the students keep doing your job for you.
Oh no, there's so much to do. I don't think we have to worry about that. But and everybody's always afraid that learning a computer. I mean, I can show you an article from 1968 1968 an architectural record. I was in high school. I was going to go to college, and it says, and there's a picture of this huge CRT with this wire frame on it. Okay, and didn't even have hidden line. And it says, if architects don't learn how to use computers, they will be replaced by them. And it just hasn't happened. I mean, humans do wonderful things. Computers do wonderful things. And I don't think we see a whole lot of, in the professions and in teaching, I don't think we have to worry about being replaced. I think we have to focus on how can we use this technology to make education better, to make us better teachers, to really help people learn what they need to learn in the 21st century, because the rules have changed. We have to teach differently.
I guess to a certain extent the comment was really sort of tongue-in-cheek, because I mean it's the more to the point. Probably the better question really to be asking is, there's you were talking about this whole thing with regards to you opened up a class and you said this was going to be a collaboration class, and the first thing the administration thinks of is, oh my God, plagiarism. Mm-hmm. It's going to be rampant. And then so we've sort of gone from there, and we've gone more into this sort of peer-to-peer model where students are doing a little bit on their own and a little bit in small groups, and a lot of it in terms of peer-to-peer. And does that, and you combine this with sort of the fact that the assessment of this is still sort of a bit of a challenge, right? I mean, is the whole aspect of what it means to be an instructor sort of changing within inside this peer-to-peer model where people are taking more responsibility for their own learning development?
God, I hope so, because I'll tell you, the impediment for education advancing is not the students, okay? It's not really the administration in many cases. So who does that leave? My resistance point is, talk about the people that don't want to collaborate, most of them are faculty members. They have their little vertical, they're very comfortable in it. A book I would like to recommend to anyone who's in education right now is Kathy N. Davidson's new book. It's called Now We See It, I believe. It's close to that. It's either Now I See It or Now You See It. And it is just so good. She just goes through, and she even has, I'm about 7/8 of the way through it, and she's talking about Second Life and how different people are using it in teaching. But, she introduced at Duke University. She was involved in the test in 2003, where they all got iPods, and she was vilified in the press over introducing technology, and with a lot of the concerns that we're talking about. It's a frivolous way of using technology. It's going to distract the students. Everybody's just hallucinating about how horrible this stuff is, and it's really not proving out to be that. I mean, the students I have can be very focused, they can be very creative, they can be very productive. Would I like Second Life to be better than it is? Sure. Has it improved in the last 5 years as much as I think it could have? No. But I do think that virtual environments and teaching are a significant factor in the future of education, in my opinion.
Right. How do you work with the students from the standpoint of, I'm just trying to figure out how to put this. In industry, there is a lot of, and staying away from the word plagiarism, there is a lot of derivative works which are created, and quite often you get involved with things like information technology and other things where people leverage off of what everybody else and anybody else is doing, either internal or external to the organization. Then you have your students, which are told, if you're caught plagiarizing, that's it. You're right, hearing and out you go. Right, it's everything has to be individual. And yet, through a lot of these particular types of processes, as we start to introduce people more and more to this idea of collaboration and derivative works, how are you handling this distinction between what is a derivative work and what is plagiarism, and enculturating the student how to identify the difference, especially for when they decide that they want to go, well, I mean, you have the academic requirement and then sort of what's going to be expected of them when they go into industry. Because those are quite often two very, very different points of view, for, I guess, lack of a better term.
Yeah, but it's so easy. The 20th century view of the queen bee, okay? Frank Lloyd Wright designed this house. Him and 20 other people, okay? If we just start looking at reality and giving credit where credit is due, you notice that there's a lot more people involved in things than we thought. The other thing is, the standing on the shoulder of giants has been the sort of historic way that we've learned as a culture. That's how we learn, is by sharing information. Now, I'm still making a distinction between cheating and stealing and copying and all those kinds of things. I'm just saying that we all work together. We all look at work. We may as well admit it and say where we got it and make good references, rather than pretend that we're coming up with original thought. I mean, that's one of the diseases in the creative fields. Architecture, music, filmmaking, art, photography. Everyone else thinks, matter of fact, the reason I was able to be the founder of a lab in our college is because prior to us creating the lab, no one thought architects, musicians, filmmakers, photographers, and artists could do research. They went, well, what kind of research will they do? All they do is sit around, and on Thursday afternoons they're visited by the muses, and then these brilliant creations just flow from their forehead, and they have no control over it. They're just such creative geniuses. It's just amazing. And that's the furthest thing from the truth. The architects are working on physics and math and calculus and structures. The musicians are learning and practicing and have to understand sound and the relationship, the mathematical relationships. The same thing with photographers and filmmakers. They have to understand chemistry, and not so much now because it's less film and more digital, but you have to understand light and timing and humor and storytelling. And with artists, it's the same thing. Everybody's working really hard. And, this idea that you're doing something on your own is, Wallace Stegner, who wrote this book called Angle of Repose, got the Pulitzer Prize for it. And then a woman who happens to teach in our English department wrote her thesis paper on writing together, writing apart. And she just pointed out that Stegner copied from a woman's diary, something like 30% of his book. And when confronted with it, Stegner didn't go, oh yeah, that's where I got it. He just went, well, she would have gotten the Pulitzer Prize if what she wrote was so great. Our society is just so dealing dishonestly with the fact that we all work together and reference each other, and we may as well just learn how to collaborate really, really well rather than trying to pretend that anyone is doing anything exclusively on their own. You can write a poem and you can be inspired, but you're using the alphabet. These are all words that have been used before, and hopefully we can get inspired by other people's work. I think that's one of the most important things, is to be inspired by other people's work. We used to kid, one of the best designers in the firm, he would take Architectural Record to the bathroom and come out with a great design idea for the building that afternoon. Well, guess where he got it? Look through the magazine. He probably saw something that inspired him. So I don't think it's a problem. I think it's really easy to encourage students to, because I watch architecture students, they'll sit in a room for 13 hours practically bleeding from the ears trying to come up with something on their own, when it's actually kinder to put them in an environment where either through your experience you can teach them something and show them how to do something, because I see a lot of room for improvement in all grades, and particularly in university, of the teachers actually teaching something, not just giving an assignment and walking out of the room or standing there, making sure everybody does it, but actually teaching something. They don't know something. Here's something. You teach them how to do it, and then they know how to do it. So I just don't see it as a problem or an issue. I know sociologically it isn't the easiest thing to do, because I've been working on it for 6 years and have accomplished what I've accomplished, but there's still a long way to go. But I'd just like to clear the air on that one and just say, hey, let's just relax and admit that most of, if you look at the Hadron Collider in Europe, or if you look at the International Space Station, these are not done by one person working by themselves for a long time or having a brilliant idea. It's all about collaboration. It's all about being able to communicate, and it's all about being able to come up with a successful project. I always joke about how there's 20 architects running around claiming they designed, every building on Earth has 20 architects running around claiming they designed it, because that's the feeling. You want to take credit for it. You want it to be yours. But I would like our culture to get more comfortable with sharing responsibilities and sharing credit for some wonderful works of art and architecture and music and things like that.
Yeah. Do you think that? Obviously you've got some degree of influence over the students coming through the various programs. Do you think industry is necessarily picking up more on that idea as well?
I hope so. I know that hopefully I'm not shocking anybody with this news, but if you're talking about industry and you're talking about the United States is in huge difficulty right now in a number of different areas. Trying to find a legitimate revenue stream for businesses and industry in the United States for the 21st century is a big challenge. there, and Kathy makes a really good presentation of, you know how we all heard that we're actually, all of our schools are based on Henry Ford's America. We're still being trained as if we were going to work on the assembly line. She goes through and lists sort of what the historic development of that is in a way that makes you realize, you know, it's actually more true than we thought. Even if you believe it, her level of detail is impressive. I don't think that if you talk to IBM, Cisco, Hewlett-Packard, any of the bigs, and you talk to an individual, 30 to 60% of the people you talk to will have never met their boss in person. They will never have met in person all the people that they're working with. And they're using all sorts of communication devices to stay in touch with them. So they're already there. Okay? They may not all be using Second Life. Actually, IBM has experimented a lot in Second Life, as most of us know. But I think the industries, I mean, look at what's going on in the United States right now. It's Google, it's Facebook, it's Twitter, it's, you know, Amazon.com, it's YouTube, iTunes, and YouTube, and different things like that. Those companies are there. You know, if we're talking about, you know, other industries, like in Montana, we still have mining. You know, like they're still digging stuff out of the ground and crushing it and selling it to people. So there's different industries, but I would say most of the world knows that, you know, it's a digital world, and the communication has got to be advanced in digital, and the education has got to go in that direction. And if people haven't seen the charts lately, the United States is in like 26th place internationally for K through 12 education. Finland's in first, Japan's sort of up there. And another thing, you didn't ask this, but I'm going to sort of supply the answer anyway. And it's related to what we're talking about, and that is, a lot of people think Nokia is a Japanese phone company. It's Finnish, okay? So in Finland, Nokia, in Finland, the country, there are more cell phones per capita than any other country on earth, okay? They also check out more library books per capita than any other country on earth. And I know people in the United States that are afraid that technology is going to make us stupid, or technology is going to make us non-readers. And it's just not an assumption anyone has to make, because you look at the most advanced educational countries on earth, and it's not happening there. So it doesn't have to happen here either. So there's a lot of concerns and fears that we have that I think we have to pay attention to those things. But I don't think we should be afraid of the future. I think we should continue to move in the direction we're moving.
Right. I want to come back to the student experience in terms of whether or not the students are finding, and actually to a certain extent from your standpoint as well. I mean, has there been an actual measurable difference between students that are participating in the virtualization exercises within a virtual collaborative environment compared to those that either didn't or couldn't because of either lack of access or because their particular program hasn't incorporated some of these particular tools as part of it?
Well, that's an excellent question. I don't know the answer exactly because I haven't seen any surveys that really compare those two things head to head.
Well, we'll use an applied research approach to it.
Okay. And I will give you some. There's a book out called Academically Adrift, and it is one of the calmest but most damning looks at higher education in the United States. And if that's an area of interest to you, higher education in the U.S., it's a must-read book. It's called Academically Adrift. Now, they're all-inclusive in how they're measuring students when they come into school and students after 2 years. Every higher education academic institution in the United States will say they have shifted over and that it's important that students can learn to be critical thinkers. Have we all heard that phrase? Do critical thinking. I mean, it's almost like we've heard it too much in some ways. They tested extensively across the board in the United States, and they found there was no measurable difference whatsoever between someone who was entering college and someone who had completed 2 years of college in their ability to do critical thinking. So not only are we probably not teaching it in the virtual world, we're not teaching it in the real world either. I don't think virtual reality makes everyone a good teacher all of a sudden. You know, I mean, it can allow people to fly. They can't fly in real life, but I'm not sure it allows people to teach who can't teach in real life. So it's transformative in some ways, but I think we have to understand what a good teacher is, how to become a good teacher and be a good teacher if we're going to have good learning going on. And so, you know, I think the United States not only, because, you know, if you look at K through 12 in the United States, it's ranked as 26th. And then people sort of pause there. They never go, well, what happens in the 13th grade? Does this country magically turn into an education dynamo that doesn't exist in K through 12? I don't think so. So I think we're coasting on fumes in the rating of a lot of our higher education in the United States. And the testing is starting to show that. Now, that's a broad general statement. I'm not taking on any specific university. And, you know, what we found is sometimes, you know, good students are good students. It doesn't matter where they are or where they go or who they have as teachers. Those are going to excel. The kind of thing that we're learning from countries like Finland is you have to teach everyone in the class. You can't just concentrate on the students that are doing well already. And so this whole education for all approach that they take is something that we're going to have to figure out for the United States, because I don't think we can just wholesale import another country's educational program into our country. But we have to think it out, and we really have to get going on this, because you know, the United States could benefit from us improving the educational system.
You actually asked a really good question. I'm actually going to turn this around and ask it back.
Okay.
What is a good teacher?
You know, I'll start way back. In 2005, one of the reasons I decided I wanted to go into education is I was watching a program. It was put on by California State University, Monterey Bay, I think. And they had the head of education at MIT, the head of education at either Carnegie Mellon or Case Western Reserve, and a number of different heads of education at different universities. And then they had the head of, you know, University of Phoenix, you know, as like a joke almost at this time. This is 2005, and people weren't really taking the online universities that seriously. And they went down the list, and went down the line, and the moderator asked everybody, well, what is teaching and learning? And the guy from MIT proudly said, we have no idea what teaching and learning is. We don't know how to teach. We don't know how to learn. We're all in this together. And I was shocked. And it was sort of like an automobile company. Now we can sort of believe that maybe they were like this too. It'd be like the head of an automobile company going, we have no idea what a car is. We don't know where the wheels go. We don't know what the steering wheel's for. We don't even know where to put the seats. In other words, if you're the head of education of a university and you're saying we have no idea what education is, and that was very popular and hip at the time, and it's one of the reasons we're in trouble right now, because I think we have a whole 5 years of higher education where it was really hip to not know what education was, not know what teaching and learning is, and I think you know it when it's happening. And it's like when you engage with students. When I have a student after 4 hours write me an email and it says, I learned more in the last 4 hours than I thought I would all semester, things are working. Okay? And I think that's what every teacher has to find their own stride and their own method. They can use construction paper. They don't have to use Photoshop. But if they do use technology, it can really enhance the fact that we're teaching students skills that they're going to need in the 21st century. That's always a good thing, not just the teachers learning how to teach in that. But I think you have to be engaged. I think students know when the teacher's bored, when the teacher's just giving an assignment, when the teacher doesn't care what kind of grade they get. So you have to be engaged. You have to be knowledgeable. You have to know what you're talking about. I mean, we've all had teachers that just sort of went through the lesson plan and you weren't even sure they really were good teachers. I mean, I can go through my life and count the good teachers I had, It wasn't every year and it wasn't every teacher. So, but I think if the student knows something they, at the end of the class that they didn't know at the beginning, that's teaching and learning happening. And it's not easy. It's exhausting. I mean, this semester, I've never worked this hard in my life before. I'm teaching. I'm doing some research. I'm going to conferences. We're trying to, present the work that we are doing. We have a house that's under construction that is based on sustainable and low energy use and disability design. And so I don't think there's a lack of things that we can do to make ourselves better teachers. And I think it's a path. It's a trajectory. It's not like you're ever done learning to be a good teacher. You just continue. You just try to be better every day.
Early on, I had mentioned that I had picked up a couple of very interesting architectural quotes, which I wanted to get some of your opinion on, especially in light of where some of these quotes coming from long before virtual worlds ever got here, and now having experienced this for the last 6-7 years in terms of what this can actually mean to students and learning in the classroom and just sort of people in general. And it's interesting that you mentioned the EcoSmart home, because I mean one of the quotes was essentially this one about form and function should be one joined in a spiritual union. And while I can sort of appreciate that from an artistic standpoint within the concept of architecture, I mean, has the nature of that really changed with things like EcoSmart homes, and some of the projects that you're doing on the as part of the creative lab stuff that's going on? Because I was sorry, my apologies. I was looking at some of the stuff that you guys had online and some of the interesting technologies that you're building into this particular piece of property, and I'm assuming that you're also doing some of this stuff virtually as well. And I was sort of looking at this and I'm thinking about this idea of form and function, and it's sort of like, yeah, but does that mean that the dynamic has actually changed as a result of virtual collaboration, or has it augmented, or has it just sort of been sort of the same?
Well, it can change. I think it's, if I can give you a complex answer to it rather than a yes or no, it has to do with, some people, architects, another quote using the words form and function is form follows function. And that was from a period of time where architects were being encouraged to understand what the use of the space is and design for that space. So a kitchen should look like a kitchen, a bedroom should look like a bedroom. It isn't just about designing a building that looks good and has bilaterally symmetrical windows and doors, but it actually, the rooms on the other side of those windows, it makes sense that they're that size. I love architecture, and there's so many different ways to practice it that anyone telling someone else what they should do is a little bit ludicrous, because people should really be able to explore architecture and virtual worlds to do what they want to do. I mean, it's wide open. In our own work, I'm what I consider a contextualist. In other words, if I'm designing a house out in the woods versus a house on the beach versus a house on the city, they're all going to be different. They're going to reflect their environment. It's not like I have one style that I superimpose into every environment that I get an opportunity to design for. And the other thing that is taught in architectural schools is this very sort of Ayn Rand, Howard Rourke approach that, if I don't like your building, I'm going to blow it up, or, I'm going to design what I want to do, kind of a thing. And, outside of that novel, it really doesn't exist. I mean, sometimes we create in architectural students an attitude before we create any talent and capability, and I think that's reversed. I think we should really be working on helping people become good architects and designers and understanding the needs of the client so they can design, or they can graduate and not be disappointed, because they're going to be disappointed if the real world is not like the fantasy world that's created in a university environment. So part of me, I love working with clients. Every house I have is different because the clients they have different collections. They have some of them have sports activities. They have different storage needs. In other words, there's no way I could design the same house for two different couples or people or families or individuals. They're so different, the house has to reflect, in my way of practicing architecture, those differences. The other thing is, like in the house that you were referring to, there are things called CC&Rs, covenants, codes, and restrictions. The family that's going to live in this house bought the property in a subdivision, and I've never even seen this before. They have a minimum square footage requirement. I've designed in neighborhoods where they have a maximum, and this does have a maximum too, but this place had a minimum. In other words, you couldn't design a house and get it approved by the neighborhood unless it was over a certain size. It also has certain materials that you have to use to get approval, and that's not uncommon. Whether you're in Santa Barbara or Sea Ranch or New Orleans or whatever, you're in a review and approval process that you have to respect, and you have to be able to work with your client and achieve those things. So it's this wonderful set of parameters, and your job as an architect is to do something wonderful within those parameters, and something that can get built. And with this house, we have, oh God, it's just so incredible. We're trying out. It's going to be more, as much like a laboratory as it is a residence or a house. And the people that are going to live in it are really into it. And our product manufacturers and material suppliers that are involved in it are really excited about it. It's going to be on a house tour later in October, and people in Bozeman are going to be able to walk around and see it. Some of the things that we're doing as far as energy are just, I've learned so much being on the project. For example, one of the things I didn't think was scalable to a single-family house is the idea of taking outside air into pipes under the ground, and just the air coming through the pipe. Under the ground, it's always around 55 degrees. So if you take, in the summer here, I'm just going to exaggerate, it's 100-degree air, and you run it underground, you can cool that air down for free. You just the earth, just going through the pipe coming into the house can cool that air down. Same thing in the winter when it's 20 below here, you bring that air down into the pipes under the ground, and you can warm it up a little bit. There was somebody who was predicting that they do not think the heater or the air conditioner will come on in this house because it's insulated, it's well insulated, it's tightly insulated, we've got ventilation, but we have all of this energy that is going to be exchanged for free. It's called geothermal. A lot of people like to reserve the term geothermal for hot springs or lava or things like that. But this is anything that is geo, earth, thermal, warm, air, it qualifies. So we have this, is air tubes, Eco Air, and we're working with a German company on this. And so we have all these different technologies that we're testing, and we've actually set up what are called redundant systems, and that's fancy words for you have two things when you only need one. So we can test, plan A against plan B and see which one works better. And the fact of the matter is these product manufacturers don't know. And the good manufacturers want to know. They want to be able to tell their client if it makes a difference whether they put these pipes under the foundation or out in the front yard or the side yard. And so we're doing a lot of serious research that we're going to find things out that nobody knows, including us. And it's one of the things you like, quotes. The one that we have on our wall up in the lab is a famous Albert Einstein quote that is, if we knew what we were doing, it wouldn't be called research. And that's the approach we take. You have to keep an open mind. You have to be exploring. You have to be willing to find out it doesn't work You have to take that chance, and you have to be able to accept when you get information that's different than what you, no matter what we do, everyone has preconceptions. I don't think that's going to work. I think that's going to work. But then you have to really look at the research, and you have to live with it, and you have to be honest and reveal it to other people so that they can benefit from that information and then do their project based on the information that you've gleaned from your own sort of experiment in the ways that we're doing our work. And our work is going to be freely available to every architecture school, every engineering school, every product manufacturer, every professional that is interested in the information. We're not trying to create something that we own and nobody else can know. So it's part of the open systems thinking and open education that is really challenging, because it is tempting to sort of be the only people on earth that know how to do this, but we made a commitment at the beginning that we're going to take the open approach on all of this information.
Right. Very good. I've got another one here, which and I realize this is probably going to be a little bit more of a bigger type question to a certain extent. Frank Lloyd Wright was once quoted as saying, "Without an architecture of our own, we have no soul of our own civilization." And from your perspective, in terms of what you've seen in industry and what you've seen with the students, and you're working with inside a virtual environment, what do you think? Well, either Frank Lloyd Wright would say, or yourself, or right, about the transient nature of architecture within inside a virtual setting, and what it says about where, without trying to get into this whole spiritual bent of things, right? What it might say about where our souls are sort of developing, and what it might mean for civilization as we continue to develop.
Well, first of all, I'll make a comment about Frank Lloyd Wright. He was incredible. I mean, I was in the Meyer May house in Grand Rapids a couple weeks ago, and it's worth worshiping. Steelcase has purchased the house and fixed it up, and we got a tour of it, and we were the only people there. The guy was good. There's just no question about it. He was wonderful. He was amazing. He was an interesting writer, but I can find almost zero relationship between his writing and his architecture. I mean, for the life of me, I'm reading about this democratic design, and I look at the building, and I'm going, I don't see democracy. I see these beautiful cantilevered overhangs, the really nice alignment of the wood siding, really thin masonry mortar joints. But democracy? I mean, it's really difficult. Architects often write about things that disconnect from architecture, and sometimes they get it, sometimes they don't. I mean, I read the stuff in Architectural Record they write about Peter Eisenman. I have no idea what they're talking about, and guess what? I don't think they do either. I don't think anyone does. I think part of the thing is just writing stuff that doesn't make any sense whatsoever, and quoting Foucault and Derrida, and making all these references, and everybody. It's sort of like the Emperor's New Clothes. Intellectually, everybody's going, "Oh wow, that is so intellectual," and and you're just sort of going, well, what are they trying to say? I mean, Frank Lloyd Wright, I think, was the best American architect. And I'm pausing because I also like Eero Saarinen, even though he was a transplant from Finland through his father. Saarinen did like the St. Louis Arch, TWA Terminal, a lot of projects, Dulles Airport, the original design. And then the other thing, as far as looking at Second Life, I don't see Second Life or virtual worlds as a panacea to architectural design. Because quite frankly, I've seen better stuff in real life than I've ever seen in Second Life. If you know who Santiago Calatrava is, and if you go to like the Milwaukee, I had the really good fortune to go with a very good friend to that building, and Jesus Christ, there's nothing like it in Second Life. I guarantee you, the best thing that Scope ever did can't touch what Calatrava did in Milwaukee, and he's done it all over Spain and all over Europe. He's a genius. I think that we could use Second Life as as a place to experiment and do prototyping and do wonderful anti-gravity designs and not need stairs and things like that. And it's a great place to design spaces for virtual worlds. But I don't think we should forget about the real world and how wonderful. I mean, if you've ever traveled around the world, I mean, there's beautiful architecture all over the place. So I think there is a spiritual nature to architecture. I challenge anyone to go to the Milwaukee Art Museum and watch the wings open up and not feel like it's a spiritual event. It is. It's gorgeous, and it's just amazing. So I do believe that we can be inspired and we can create architecture that is inspiring. And that's really the opportunity of life, and it's the opportunity of Second Life.
Is it more to a certain extent? And it's kind of interesting because I mean you're referring to these iconic landmarks that are there and they're sort of persistent. But I mean, is there a value in having things that are transient and will always be transient? That you know that something has been set up and it will only be there for a week, or it will only be there for a month, and then it's gone.
Sure. I mean, it creates a level of appreciation and urgency and temporal appreciation that's just completely different. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I don't think they should do it on purpose. I mean, I've seen stuff in Second Life that I wish was still there, and I mean, I've been part of movements that tried to raise money to save certain worlds or islands or cultures or buildings or whatever, and it's brutal. I mean, it's brutal in real life. It's brutal in Second Life. Some of this stuff goes away no matter what we do. But I always say, if you have any question about how important buildings are, just think about postcards. Every time someone goes somewhere, I would bet 80% of the time you get a postcard with a building on it. That's what makes Paris, Paris. It's what makes Tokyo, Tokyo. I mean, it's what humans do that is one of the most magnificent things. I'm still amazed by architecture when you realize how many people it takes to even design and build a building. It's just phenomenal. And then you look at some of these things, and I realize I'm up in Montana, so I mean, people up here send postcards of moose to people, and but for the most part, I mean, people will travel halfway around the world to see a building or to be in a place that has distinctive architecture. It's a human expression that's just phenomenal. And whether it's the pyramids, or whether it's the latest, creation from, Frank Gehry. It's just a really interesting sport.
A sport.
Well, I think calling it an art all the time is it, and we talked about the spiritual nature of it. It's like a sport. I mean, it's like training for an Olympic event. You don't do architecture in your spare time, and you don't do architecture casually. I mean, you really have to be in shape, mentally and physically, and have the right tools, and have clients, and have budgets, and those kinds of things. I mean, you really got to be in the game. And it's a challenge. And I respect all architects and what they're able to accomplish, because it's a really challenging area. And particularly now. I mean, I think 49% of the architects in the United States are unemployed at the moment. It's a very challenging time. So,
all that pent up creativity just waiting to explode.
Well, hopefully they won't explode. A lot of them will. A lot of people are in any field for the money. So a lot of the, real estate developers and architects that were only in it for the money, they'll find other things to do. And it actually sort of, I've had sort of 3 or 4 purgings, nothing like the current economic climate. No one I know that's alive now has ever seen anything like this before. But it's usually a roller coaster ride. It's not a, a steady climbing, improving economic environment for architects, just like it isn't that way for any profession or field, or certainly the U.S. economy.
Yeah. I've got one last question, then we're going to have to wrap up because we're sort of at the end of our time here. Okay. If you had a crystal ball, what do you think the impacts of virtual worlds will be on society in 5 to 10 years?
Well, what I hope, can I go that direction, or you want me to?
Sure. No, it's
okay.
Answer how you will.
Okay. I was just I'm working with people who, for example, my friends that are ecologists and work in the environment and things like that, and they spend time at Glacier Park and Yellowstone or out in the prairies or in the forests, they have a tendency to think of the environment as excluding people. And quite frankly, some of them, when I said built environment, they said, isn't that an oxymoron? Isn't environment things that don't have human involvement? And if you've studied cultures, you know that it's a huge schism between the cultures that think humans are part of nature and the cultures that don't necessarily think humans are part of nature, that they're a part of nature, apart from nature. So, and then in the middle are all these, in particular in most states, whether it's Wisconsin or Montana or California, it's a large, agricultural community. So we call those managed lands, if it's a farm, if it's a ranch or whatever. So it's like this third environment. We've got the natural environment, we have the managed environment, and we have the built environment. And I would like to see virtual worlds, virtual environments, take their place as one of the 4 environments where people interact with each other and think about both virtual and real world stuff and enjoy the opportunities that are available in both of them. I mean, I know people that are just in here having the time of their lives and they don't want to be worried with real things, and I think that's fine. But I think for my purposes, the reason I came into Second Life in 2005 was almost like to prototype things, to have to try out things, to do Thomas Jefferson's academical village for the 21st century and then figure out how to build it in real life. I mean, I'm in here to see what I can create and take out and apply to the real world and then come back with something else. So if I could, see in 10 years, if virtual environments have taken their place as one of the 4 major environments studied and used on Earth, I would be thinking that's a really good development for all of us.
Very good. Well, thank you very much, Terry. I mean, that's all the time we have available for the broadcast show. I'd like to invite you to stay for an after-show wrap-up if you've got a few more minutes.
Sure.
It's been wonderful having you on, and looking forward to good things to come.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
So that's it for the Inside the Avatar studio from the Rockcliffe Rotunda. On October 19th, we'll be having Draxor Drespries, and hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, also Bernard Drax, and the director Daniel Moschel will be speaking about their movie Login to Second Life. So we're going to be having them on here on October 19th. Inside the Avatar Studio is produced by Bevan Whitfield and Rockcliffe University Consortium. Technical production by Robustus Hacks and Mel Burns in association with Metaverse TV. For more information on Inside the Avatar Studio, check out our website at urockcliffe.com or subscribe to our Twitter or Facebook fan pages.